The Wyoming dawn came cold and clear, the kind of morning where frost clung to sagebrush and your breath turned to vapor in the high country air. Riley Morgan had been awake for an hour already, moving through the darkness with the practiced silence her grandfather had drilled into her since she was 10 years old. She was 28 now. Gunny Dan had been gone for 6 years, but every morning she woke at 0500 she felt him watching. The ranch house sat alone in the Medicine Bow Mountains, 15 miles from the nearest paved road. Her grandmother still lived there, still woke before dawn to make coffee strong enough to strip paint. Riley had driven up from Camp Lejeune on a week's leave, needing the space, needing the silence, needing to remember who she was before the Marine Corps tried to tell her. Now she stood at the edge of the eastern pasture, her grandfather's rifle cradled in her arms like a sleeping child. The M1 Garand, Korean War vintage, 1952. Gunny Dan had carried it at the Chosin Reservoir when he was 17 years old and stupid brave. He'd killed 11 Chinese soldiers with it in a single frozen night, saving his entire squad from an ambush they never saw coming. He'd cleaned it every Sunday for 60 years after that. Never fired it again in anger, only in practice and teaching, in passing down something more valuable than the weapon itself. Patience. Riley settled into position behind the shooting bench Gunny had built from railroad ties and 2x6s. 600 yards downrange, prairie dogs were starting to emerge from their burrows, oblivious to the death that could reach them from over a third of a mile away. She chambered around. The action clacked smooth as silk. 72 years old, and this rifle still functioned like it rolled off the Springfield Armory assembly line yesterday. Through the iron sights, no scope, Gunny never believed in scopes. For training, she found her first target. A fat prairie dog, standing sentinel on a dirt mound, watching the sunrise like he owned the whole damn state. Riley breathed. 4 seconds in, 7 seconds hold, 8 seconds out. Her grandfather's voice echoed in memory. Patience beats speed every time, little hawk. The shot's already there. You just gotta wait for the universe to line up right. She waited. The prairie dog turned, presenting a perfect profile. Riley squeezed the trigger between heartbeats. The Garand barked. The recoil punched her shoulder like an old friend saying hello. 600 yards away, the prairie dog ceased to exist. Riley chambered another round, found another target, repeated the process. 5 shots, 5 prairie dogs. The morning sun climbed higher and the mountain air carried the smell of cordite down the valley. She was lining up her 6th shot when her cell phone buzzed in her jacket pocket. Riley ignored it. She squeezed the trigger. Another prairie dog learned about consequences. The phone buzzed again, then started actually ringing, which nobody did anymore, unless it was an emergency or her grandmother calling to say breakfast was ready. Riley cleared the rifle, made it safe, and pulled out her phone. Unknown number. Virginia area code. She almost declined it, but something instinct training her grandfather's ghost whispering in her ear made her answer. Corporal Morgan. Her voice came out flat professional, the way the Marine Corps had taught her to answer phones when you didn't know who was calling. Corporal Riley Morgan? A man's voice. Older, with the kind of authority that came from 30 years of telling people what to do and having them do it without question. Speaking. This is Colonel Vance Jasock. You need to be at Fort Bragg by 1400 hours today. This is not a request. Riley checked her watch. 0542. Fort Bragg was 2,000 miles away. Even if she left right now, she'd barely make it. Sir, I'm on approved leave. Your leave is canceled. Pack your kit, dress uniform, bring your rifle. A pause, then the colonel's voice dropped half an octave. Commander Hendricks specifically requested you by name, Corporal. If you want to know why your grandfather died, you'll be on that plane. The line went dead. Riley stood there in the Wyoming morning, holding her dead grandfather's rifle while the world tilted sideways and rearranged itself into something she didn't recognize. Commander Hendricks. Jack Hendricks. Call sign Frost. She'd met him exactly once at Gunny Dan's funeral 6 years ago. He'd stood in the back wearing his dress whites, a Navy SEAL commander, surrounded by Marines looking like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. After the service, he'd approached her, shaken her hand, and said exactly 7 words. Your grandfather was the finest man I knew. Then he'd walked away, climbed into a black sedan, and disappeared from her life. Until now. Riley looked down at the rifle in her hands, at the worn stock where her grandfather's hands had gripped it for 70 years. At the serial number stamped into the receiver, 3247689. If you want to know why your grandfather died. The official report said hunting accident. Daniel Morgan, 83, former Master Gunnery Sergeant, United States Marine Corps. Found dead in the Montana wilderness with a rifle malfunction. Tragic. Unfortunate. These things happen to old men who refuse to admit they're old. But Riley had seen that rifle. She'd examined it at the funeral home when nobody was looking. The malfunction was bullshit. Somebody had sabotaged the firing pin, made it look accidental, and counted on the local sheriff being too lazy or too stupid to investigate further. She tried to tell people, the Marines, the FBI, anybody who'd listen. Nobody listened to a 22-year-old corporal with a conspiracy theory about her dead grandfather. So she'd buried it, buried him, carried the weight of knowing he'd been murdered and not being able to do a damn thing about it. Until now. Riley pulled out her phone and called her grandmother. "Breakfast is ready," the old woman answered without preamble. "Eggs are getting cold." "Grandma, I have to go. Something came up." A long silence. Then, "This about your grandfather." Riley closed her eyes. Her grandmother knew, had always known. They'd never talked about it directly, but the knowing sat between them like a third person at every meal. "Yeah, then you go. You go and you finish it." Her grandmother's voice cracked the first time Riley had heard that happen in 6 years. "He spent his last 3 years teaching you everything he knew. Every shot, every skill, every story. You know why, Graham? Because he knew this day was coming. He knew somebody would finally come asking. And he made sure you'd be ready." A pause, then the steel came back into the old woman's voice. "So you get on that plane. You do what needs doing, and you come back when it's done. I love you, Graham." "I know, baby. He knows too. Now go make him proud." Fort Bragg looked exactly like every other military base Riley had ever seen, flat-hot organized in a grid pattern that made perfect sense if you'd been in the military for 20 years, and no sense at all if you hadn't. She caught a hop on a C-130 out of Cheyenne, spent 4 hours listening to the hydraulic scream of the cargo bay, and arrived at Pope Army Airfield with exactly 12 minutes to spare. A staff sergeant in ACUs met her at the flight line, checked her ID, and drove her to a nondescript building on the edge of the base that had no markings, no windows on the ground floor, and a level of security usually reserved for nuclear launch codes. They took her phone, her smartwatch, her rifle, which hurt more than anything else. Then they led her through 3 separate security checkpoints, down 2 flights of stairs, and into a room that was technically called a skiff, but everybody just called it the vault. Sensitive, compartmented information facility, where secrets went to breed. 3 people waited inside. The first was a woman in Army dress uniform, full bird colonel, with an intelligence branch insignia and enough ribbons to suggest she'd spent her entire career in places that didn't officially exist. She was maybe 55, gray hair pulled back in a regulation bun, and eyes that analyzed Riley like she was a math problem that didn't quite add up. "Corporal Morgan, I'm Colonel Patricia Vance, JSOC liaison. Thank you for coming on such short notice." Riley stood at attention. "Ma'am." The second person was a man in his 40s, wearing civilian clothes, khakis, and a button-down that screamed government contractor. He had a tablet in his hands and the kind of face that disappeared in crowds. "CIA Deputy Director Walsh," Vance said, not bothering with the first name. "He'll be observing." Walsh nodded but didn't speak. The third person made Riley's heart skip. He stood in the corner, arms crossed, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt that looked like it came from the same era as her grandfather's rifle. He was maybe 58, 6 feet tall, lean as a whip, with gray hair buzzed military short, and a face that had seen every bad thing the world had to offer and decided to keep looking anyway. His eyes were the coldest blue Riley had ever seen, like looking into a glacier. "Commander Jack Hendricks," Vance said, "retired SEAL Team 6, currently serving as a consultant for—" "We know each other," Hendricks said. His voice sounded like gravel in a cement mixer. "She's Dan Morgan's granddaughter, the one he spent his last 3 years training." He looked at Riley and something passed between them. Recognition, understanding. The acknowledgement that they both belonged to a club nobody wanted to join. People who knew Daniel Morgan hadn't died in a goddamn hunting accident. "Sit," Vance said, gesturing to a chair. Riley sat. The others remained standing, which was a power play older than the Marine Corps itself. Vance touched the tablet on the conference table. A wall screen flickered to life, showing satellite imagery of desert terrain. Rocky hills, scattered vegetation, a few dirt roads cutting through nothing to nowhere. "Northern Syria," Vance said, 20 clicks south of the Turkish border. 4 days ago, Commander Hendricks went missing in this area while conducting private security consultation for the State Department. The screen changed, showing a closer view. A small compound, maybe 6 buildings surrounded by a wall that wouldn't stop a determined teenager. Last communication was 84 hours ago, a single encrypted transmission. Vance touched the tablet again. A voice filled the room, Hendrix's voice, but younger from a recording, secure Raven 9, Dawn. Then static. That's all we've got, Walsh said, speaking for the first time. His voice was pure East Coast bureaucrat. No follow-up, no response to queries. Satellite thermal shows the compound was abandoned 6 hours after that transmission. Riley looked at the real Hendrix still standing in the corner. Sir, if you're missing, why are you here? Hendrix smiled, and it wasn't a nice expression. Because that recording is from 4 days ago. I made it back yesterday. Barely. The screen changed again, showing photos that made Riley's stomach clench. Hendrix or someone who looked like him, tied to a chair in a concrete room. Beaten. Bloody. But alive. 3 contractors grabbed me off a desert highway. Hendrix said, his voice flat as a frozen lake. Professional snatch and grab. They had intel on my movements, my vehicle, my route. Somebody fed them information. He pushed off from the wall, moved to the table, and leaned forward on his knuckles like a boxer waiting for the bell. They held me for 48 hours, asked questions about an operation from 1984, asked what I knew about Soviet gold, asked what Dan Morgan told me before he died. Riley felt ice water replace the blood in her veins. They let you go, she asked. They tried to kill me. I disagreed. Hendrix straightened up, and Riley saw the way he moved stiff on the left side, probably broken ribs. I made it to the Turkish border, called in an extraction, and spent the last 24 hours trying to figure out who the hell sold me out. Vance cleared her throat. Which brings us why you're here, Corporal. The screen changed one more time. A photo of her grandfather. Not the old man she remembered from his funeral, but younger, maybe 48, wearing Marine combat utilities and standing in front of a shot-up building with smoke rising in the background. Beirut, 1983, Vanna said. Your grandfather was part of a Marine security detachment when the barracks bombing killed 241 Americans. He saved 17 people that day, including a young Navy hospital corpsman named Raymond Sullivan. Another photo appeared, a young man, early 20s, with a baby face and terrified eyes being carried on Gunny Dan's back through rubble and fire. Sullivan went on to become a Navy SEAL, served with Commander Hendrix for 35 years. He's part of the team we're putting together to go back into Syria and finish what Hendrix started. Riley looked at Hendrix. What exactly did you start, sir? Hendrix reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a small object. He set it on the table in front of Riley. It was a dog tag, worn scratched with a chain that had been cut rather than broken. Riley picked it up, read the stamped information. Morgan Daniel R. 585773847 USMCOPOS. The world went very quiet. I found that 3 clicks from where they grabbed me, Hendrix said softly. Hanging from a tree branch, like somebody wanted me to see it. Like somebody was sending a message. Riley's hands started shaking. She put them in her lap where nobody could see. Your grandfather died 6 years ago, Vance said. In Montana. Hunting accident. But Commander Hendrix has reason to believe that's not the whole story. It's not a story at all, Hendrix said. It's a cover-up. Your grandfather was investigating something called Operation Raven. Soviet gold looted from Afghanistan in the 1980s. 12 tons of it hidden in caves along the Syrian border. Worth about $720 million at today's prices. He looked at Riley with those glacier eyes. Dan found out who stole it, found out where it was hidden, and they killed him to keep him quiet. Made it look like an accident. Made it look like an old man who didn't know when to quit. The ice water in Riley's veins turned to fire. Who? The word came out somewhere between a whisper and a growl. That's what we're going to find out, Hendrix said. That's why I requested you specifically. Your grandfather left something for you, a message. He knew if I went looking, they'd come for me too. And when they did, I'd need someone I could trust. Someone he trained. Someone who shoots like he did. Hendrix pulled out an envelope from his other pocket, sealed, with Riley's name written on it in her grandfather's handwriting. He gave this to me 3 years before he died. Said if anything happened to him, and if I went into Syria, I should bring you this letter and his granddaughter. Riley took the envelope with shaking hands. The paper was yellowed, the ink faded. She broke the seal and pulled out a single photograph in a handwritten note. The photo showed her grandfather and Hendrix younger, standing in front of a cave entrance in rocky terrain. Both men wore civilian clothes but carried military weapons. Both were smiling, but the smiles had edges. The note was 3 sentences. Riley trusts no one but Frost. Complete the mission, finish what I started. Gunny Dan. Riley looked up at Hendrix. What mission? Find the gold. Find who killed your grandfather and make them pay for every life they've destroyed covering this up. Walsh spoke up from his corner. There's more. The investigation into Operation Raven suggests 17 people have died over the last 40 years protecting this secret. Accidents, suicides, combat deaths that don't quite add up. He pulled out a printed list, slid it across the table. Riley scanned the names. Most she didn't recognize. But three-quarters down the list, Morgan Daniel R., 2018, hunting accident, Montana. Her vision blurred. She blinked hard, forced the tears back down where they came from. Your grandfather was victim number 14, Hendricks said quietly. I was supposed to be number 18. Question is, are you willing to help me find who's running this conspiracy and shut it down permanently? Riley looked at the photo of her grandfather, at his smile, at the way he stood confident, capable, comfortable with violence when necessary. She'd spent her whole childhood trying to be like him, trying to shoot like him, move like him, think like him, and for 6 years she'd carried the weight of knowing he was murdered and not being able to do anything about it. Not anymore. When do we leave? Riley asked. They gave her 6 hours to prepare. The gear room looked like every other gear room she'd seen: concrete floors, metal shelves, and enough weapons to start a small war. A staff sergeant with a lazy eye and a Fort Bragg patch handed her a duffel and pointed to a corner. Build your kit. Anything you need, we got. Anything you don't see, ask. Riley started with the basics. Plate carrier, level 4 ceramic plates, IFAC medical kit, 3 liters of water in a hydration bladder, 4 MREs, 100 feet of 550 cord, headlamp, compass, map case, GPS unit that looked like the case more than her truck, then the weapons. Her primary sniper rifle had already been selected, M40A5, the Marine Corps Scout sniper workhorse. It sat on a table like an altar offering. Riley picked it up, felt the weight, checked the action. .308 Winchester, 25-inch stainless steel barrel threaded for suppression. Schmidt and Bender scope 5 to 25 magnification. This rifle could reach out and touch someone at 1,000 yards like tapping them on the shoulder. She mounted the scope, torqued the rings to spec, and spent 20 minutes getting the eye relief perfect. Then she dry-fired 50 times, feeling the trigger brake, learning where the restart was, building muscle memory. Ammunition came next. 12 boxes of Federal Gold Medal Match 168 grain boat tail hollow point. Premium stuff. Every round built to fly true and hit hard. She loaded 10 magazines, 20 rounds each. 200 rounds total. If she needed more than that, she was already dead. Sidearm Glock 19 Gen 5 9mm 15-round magazines. Simple, reliable, boring. She loaded 3 mags, chambered a round, made it safe, and holstered it on her right hip. Knife KA bar USMC standard issue. 7 inches of carbon steel that had been killing people efficiently since 1942. She strapped it to her left calf. The staff sergeant watched her work, occasionally grunting approval. You Morgan's granddaughter? He asked. Yes. Heard stories about that old man. They say he made a 900-yard shot in Korea with iron sights. No scope. 30 below weather. Wind so bad it was snowing sideways. Riley checked the tension on her plate carrier straps. He made a lot of shots. That was just one. They say he never missed. Riley looked at the sergeant. He missed once. Guy he was aiming at ducked at the last second. Bullet went high, hit the guy standing behind him instead. Granddad said missing was worse than dying, because when you miss, somebody else pays the price. The sergeant nodded slowly. You shoot like him. I try. That's all anybody can do. The team briefing happened at 2200 hours in a different room, bigger, with a conference table that could seat 12 but only held 4. Riley came in wearing her gear rifle slung across her chest, looking like every other operator who'd ever walked into a mission brief. Except she was 5'4" and weighed 122 pounds, soaking wet. The first person she saw was Hendricks, now dressed in full kit, looking 20 years younger and 10 times more dangerous. He nodded at her, gestured to a seat. The second person was a man in his 60s, built like a concrete block, with a face that looked like it had stopped a few punches in its time. He wore seal trident on his plate carrier and had the calm, patient expression of someone who'd been in so many firefights they all blurred together. Master Chief Raymond Sullivan, Hendricks said. Doc to his friends. Doc, this is Corporal Riley Morgan. Doc looked at Riley for a long moment. His eyes were brown, deep-set, and completely unimpressed. They sent us a girl. His voice sounded like he smoked a pack a day for 40 years and gargled with battery acid. For Frost. The room went very quiet. Riley held his gaze, didn't blink, didn't look away, just waited. Finally, Hendricks spoke. Doc Dan Morgan pulled you out of the Beirut rubble, carried you on his back while the building was still collapsing. You told me once you owed him your life. I do. Then show some respect to the woman he spent his last 3 years training to finish his mission. Doc's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. How good is she? Only one way to find out, Riley said. They moved to the range at 2300 hours. Night shoot ambient light, only no illumination beyond what the moon and stars provided. Riley's target was a steel silhouette at 1,000 yards, half a mile away. Most people couldn't see it with the naked eye, let alone hit it. She built her shooting position on the dirt behind a shooting bench, using her pack as a rest. Settled in behind the rifle. Adjusted the scope's parallax. Checked the wind indicator, a piece of surveyor's tape tied to a stake 20 yards downrange. Wind was 5 miles per hour from the west. Temperature 78 degrees. Humidity 42%, altitude 300 feet above sea level. She pulled out a small notebook, ran the calculations. Drop at 1,000 yards for 168 grain 308, approximately 300 inches. Wind drift approximately 18 inches. She dialed the scope's turrets, making the corrections. Then she settled in behind the rifle and waited. Hendricks stood 10 feet away with a spotting scope. Doc stood beside him, arms crossed, skeptical as hell. Wind's variable, Doc said. Good luck with that. Riley ignored him. She watched the surveyor's tape, watched the sagebrush, watched the way heat shimmer moved across the ground even at night. She breathed. 4 seconds in, 7 seconds hold, 8 seconds out. Her heart rate dropped to 52 beats per minute. The world narrowed to the scope picture. The crosshairs settled on the target, moved with her breathing, pulsed with her heartbeat. She waited. The wind dropped. The surveyor's tape went limp. Perfect condition. Would last maybe 3 seconds. Riley squeezed the trigger between heartbeats. The rifle barked. The suppressor took most of the sound, but Riley still felt the recoil punch her shoulder. Through the scope, she watched the bullet fly, a tiny distortion in the air, ripple in reality itself. 1.4 seconds later, the steel target rang like a church bell. Hit, Hendricks said from behind the spotting scope. Center mass. Riley chambered another round, found the target again, squeezed again. Crack, ring. Hit, 2 inches right of first, another round. Crack, ring. Hit, dead center. 3 more rounds, 3 more hits, 5 shots total, 6 seconds between shots, at 1,000 yards in the dark with variable wind. Riley cleared the rifle, made it safe, and stood up. Doc stared at her. His mouth hung open slightly, like his jaw forgot it was supposed to stay closed. What was your group size? Riley asked Hendricks. Hendricks lowered the spotting scope, looked at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, he smiled. 2.3 inches. At 1,000 yards. He looked at Doc. Dan taught her right. Doc finally closed his mouth, walked over to Riley, and stuck out his hand. Master Chief Raymond Sullivan. Friends call me Doc. You can too. Riley shook his hand. His grip was firm, but not crushing, testing her, but not trying to prove anything anymore. Dan Morgan was the finest Marine I ever knew, Doc said. He saved my life in Beirut, pulled me out of hell when I was too stupid and too young to know I was about to die. I owe him everything. He paused, looked at Riley with those deep-set brown eyes. I didn't believe Frost when he said we needed you. Thought you were charity. Thought you were here because of your name, not your skill. He glanced at the distant target, still ringing faintly in the night air. I was wrong. You'll do, Morgan. You'll do just fine. Riley felt something unlock in her chest, some weight she'd been carrying without realizing it. Thank you, Master Chief. It's Doc. And you don't thank me. You just keep shooting like that, and we'll bring your grandfather's killers to justice. The final briefing happened at 0300. 2 more people joined them. The first was a woman, early 40s Army uniform, with a 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment patch. She had black hair pulled back in a tactical bun and the kind of calm expression that came from flying helicopters through the worst weather and the heaviest fire the world could throw at you. Captain Kira Blackwood, Hendricks said. Call sign Nomad. She'll be our pilot and extraction. Kira, this is Corporal Riley Morgan. Kira nodded. Heard good things about your shooting. Try not to need extraction. My bird's been in the shop for 3 days and I don't trust the mechanics. I'll do my best. The second person was younger, maybe 34, Air Force uniform with a combat controller patch. He had red hair, freckles, and the eager expression of someone who still thought war was exciting. Staff Sergeant Colt Ramsey, Hendricks said, Air Force ECT. He'll handle communications, drone surveillance, and calling in air support if things go completely sideways. Colt Corporal Morgan. Colt stuck out his hand. You're the one who just shot 5 for 5 at 1,000 yards in the dark. Yes. That's insane. I love it. We're going to get along great. Riley shook his hand and immediately pegged him as the type who talked too much when he was nervous, which meant he'd be talking non-stop during the entire operation. Hendricks called them to attention. They gathered around the table while he pulled up the satellite imagery on a wall screen. Operation simple in concept, complex in execution. We insert via hey-ho jump from 28,000 feet. Glide 40 miles into Syria under the radar. Land here, he pointed to a spot on the map, 8 clicks south of the target compound. The image zoomed in, showing terrain that looked like the surface of Mars. Rocky barren with scattered vegetation and a few dirt trails cutting through nothing. Intelligence suggests Commander Hendricks was held at this compound before he escaped. We believe his captors were private military contractors working for someone with significant resources and political protection. Who? Riley asked. That's what we're going to find out. We know they're connected to Operation Raven. We know they've killed at least 14 people, covering it up. We know they have access to classified information about U.S. military operations. Hendricks looked at each of them in turn. This is not an official mission. If you're captured, the U.S. government will deny knowledge. If you're killed, there will be no flag-draped coffin. No burial at Arlington. You'll just disappear, and eventually they'll tell your families you died in a training accident somewhere nobody can verify. He let that sink in for a moment. Questions? Doc raised his hand. Rules of engagement. Defend yourselves, avoid civilian casualties. Beyond that, use your judgment. These people are professional killers working for a criminal conspiracy. Treat them accordingly. Colt raised his hand. What's our extraction window? 48 hours from insertion. If we're not at the primary LZ, Nomad will check the secondary. If we're not there either, she leaves and you walk to Turkey. It's 87 miles. Bring good boots. Riley raised her hand. What exactly are we looking for at the compound? Hendricks pulled out a folded piece of paper, opened it, and smoothed it on the table. It was a hand-drawn map, old and faded with notes written in cramped handwriting. Your grandfather made this in 1984. It's a map of the cave system where the Soviet gold is supposedly hidden. He spent 6 months in Afghanistan and Syria tracking it down. Never found it. But he got close enough that someone's decided he knew too much. Riley leaned closer, studying the map. The handwriting was definitely her grandfather's. She'd seen it on enough birthday cards and letters during her childhood. He left this with me for safekeeping, Hendricks said. Told me if anything happened to him, someone would need to finish what he started. I think that compound is related to the caves. I think whoever grabbed me is moving the gold. And I think they're willing to kill anyone who gets close. He looked at Riley. Your grandfather spent 40 years trying to expose this conspiracy. Died trying. Now it's our turn. You and Owen. Riley looked at the map, at her grandfather's handwriting, at the careful notes and coordinates and warnings written in the margins. She thought about 6 years of carrying the weight of knowing he was murdered. 6 years of being told she was crazy. 6 years of feeling helpless. Not anymore. I'm in, Riley said. Outstanding. Hendricks checked his watch. We load in 4 hours. Get some rest. Pray if you are the praying type. And check your gear one more time. Because once we jump, we're committed. Riley didn't sleep. Couldn't. Instead, she sat in the ready room at 0430, cleaning her rifle for the 3rd time, checking and rechecking every component, every connection, every possible failure point. Doc found her there at 0500, also unable to sleep, also checking his gear. They sat in silence for a while, the comfortable silence of people who understood that sometimes talking just made things worse. Finally, Doc spoke. You know what Dan said to me in Beirut when he was carrying me out of that building and the whole thing was coming down around us? Riley looked up from her rifle. What? He said, stop screaming, kid. You're making my ears ring. Doc smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. I was 22, had a sucking chest wound, was sure I was going to die. And this crusty old Marine, he was 48 but looked 70, was making jokes while the world exploded. Doc leaned back in his chair, stared at the ceiling. He saved 17 people that day. Went back into the rubble 17 times. Last time, the building collapsed completely. Trapped him for 6 hours before they dug him out. Broken ribs, punctured lung, 3rd-degree burns on his back. Doc said he'd never walk right again. He never even mentioned it, Riley said. That's because Dan Morgan didn't do things for the recognition. He did them because they needed doing. Because someone had to. Because that's what Marines do. Doc looked at Riley. He spent his last 3 years teaching you everything he knew. Every shot, every skill, every story. You know why? Riley felt her throat tighten. Colonel Vance said he knew this day was coming. More than that, he knew he was going to die. Knew they were coming for him, could have run, could have hidden, could have just let it go. Doc leaned forward. But Dan Morgan never quit anything in his life. So instead of running, he trained you. Made sure when they killed him, the mission wouldn't die with him. Riley's hand started shaking again. She gripped the rifle tighter to hide it. He loved you enough to turn himself into bait, Doc said softly. Loved you enough to die so you could live. And loved you enough to give you the tools to finish what he started. A single tear rolled down Riley's cheek. She wiped it away quickly, angry at herself for showing weakness. Don't, Doc said. Don't be ashamed. Crying doesn't make you weak. Makes you human. Your grandfather cried at my wedding, cried when his wife died, cried watching the sunset over the ocean because he thought it was beautiful, and he was man enough to admit it. He stood up, walked over to Riley, and put a hand on her shoulder. You're about to jump out of an airplane at 28,000 feet and glide into a hostile country to hunt down the people who killed your grandfather. You're going to do it with a rifle he taught you to shoot and skills he spent his life passing down. And you're going to succeed because you're Dan Morgan's granddaughter and Morgan women don't quit. Riley looked up at him. How do you know I'll succeed? Doc smiled. Because I've been doing this for 40 years. I've seen 1,000 operators come and go. Most are competent. Some are good. A handful are great. And once in a generation, you get someone who's touched by something beyond skill. He squeezed her shoulder. Your grandfather was touched. And so are you. I saw it tonight when you shot. The patience, the control, the way you waited for the perfect moment instead of forcing it. That's not training. That's something deeper. Something that can't be taught. He let go, stepped back. Now finish checking your gear. We got a plane to catch. The C-70 Globemaster took off from Pope Army Airfield at 0700 hours. Inside the cargo bay, 5 operators sat in jump seats wearing oxygen masks and cold weather gear that made them look like astronauts preparing for a moon landing. The Loadmaster gave them the 10-minute warning. Then 5. Then 1. At 28,000 feet somewhere over the Mediterranean Sea, the rear cargo door opened. Wind screamed into the bay. The temperature dropped to -40. Riley's oxygen mask fogged, then cleared, then fogged again. Hendricks stood first, checked his parachute rig, checked his altimeter, checked the GPS unit strapped to his wrist. Then he looked at Riley and gave her a thumbs up. She returned it. Doc went second, then Colt, then Riley. She stood at the edge of the ramp, looking down at nothing. The Mediterranean was 30,000 feet below, invisible in the pre-dawn darkness. Turkey was 40 miles ahead. Syria 40 miles beyond that. Her grandfather's voice echoed in memory. Patience beats speed every time, little hawk. Riley stepped off the ramp into 5 miles of empty air. For 3 seconds she fell. Then her parachute deployed, the canopy snapped open, and suddenly she was gliding instead of falling. The MC-5 Ram Air parachute had a glide ratio of 3-to-1. For every foot she fell, she moved forward 3 feet. At 28,000 feet, that meant she could glide nearly 16 miles before landing. Plenty of range to cross the Turkish coast, cross 40 miles of Syria, and land at the designated LZ without anyone on the ground knowing they were there. Riley checked her GPS, checked her heading, made small adjustments to her glide path. Around her, she could see the others' dark shapes against a darker sky, flying in formation like migrating birds. Below, the world slowly resolved into detail. Coastlines, cities, roads, mountains, and finally, as the sun began to rise behind them, the Syrian desert. 22 minutes after stepping off the ramp, Riley's boots touched Syrian soil. She collapsed the parachute, buried it in a shallow hole, and marked the GPS coordinates. Then she shouldered her pack, checked her rifle, and moved toward the rally point. 4 shadows emerged from the darkness. Doc, Hendricks, Colt, and 1 missing. Where's Nomad? Riley whispered. Already gone, Hendricks said. Flew straight to the forward operating base. She'll be standing by for extraction. He pulled out a tablet, checked their position against the planned route. 8 clicks to the compound, 4 hours at tactical pace. Sunrise in 90 minutes. We need to be in position before the sun comes up. He looked at each of them. From this point forward, we're in hostile territory. Anyone we meet is probably hostile. Anyone who sees us definitely becomes hostile. Weapons tight unless I give the order. Any questions? No one spoke. Outstanding. Doc, you're on point. Riley, you're slack. I'll take center. Colt, your rear security. Stay alert. Stay quiet. And if things go bad, remember your training. They moved out in a tactical column, walking through the Syrian night like ghosts who'd forgotten they were dead. The Syrian desert tasted like copper and diesel fuel. Riley moved through the pre-dawn darkness, her boots finding purchase on loose rock and hard-packed sand, her eyes adjusting to the gradual shift from black to gray as the sun prepared to announce itself over the eastern horizon. Doc Sullivan moved like water ahead of her, 63 years old, and the man flowed across terrain that would have broken younger operators. He read the ground like Riley read wind, instinctively, constantly making micro-adjustments that kept them in dead ground and shadow. They covered the first 4 kilometers in 90 minutes. The terrain rose gradually, transitioning from flat desert to rolling hills, studded with rock formations that looked like ancient gods had played dice and left the pieces where they fell. Hendricks called a halt at a wadi, a dry riverbed cut into the landscape by water that hadn't flowed in decades. They took cover in the depression, catching their breath, hydrating, checking equipment. After 30 seconds, Hendricks gestured Riley forward. She low-crawled the 10 meters, staying below the rim of the wadi. Hendricks pointed at the tablet screen. Compound's 3 clicks northeast. We'll approach from the west, use this ridgeline for cover. Riley, I want you on overwatch. Find a position with good visibility and range. You'll be our eyes and our insurance policy. He zoomed in on the satellite image showing a rocky prominence that overlooked the compound from 900 meters. That's your position? Get there, get set up, and glass the area. If this goes loud, you start dropping targets. Prioritize heavy weapons first, then leadership, then targets of opportunity. Riley studied the image, memorizing terrain features. What's Doc and Colt's job? We're doing a close approach. See what we can learn. See if Frost's intelligence about the compound is accurate. Doc's voice was gravelly whisper. You're Overwatch and Guardian Angel. We're the bait. I don't like using you as bait. Doc smiled, teeth white in the darkness. Kid, I've been bait more times than you've been alive. I'm good at it. They split into 2 elements. Riley broke left, heading for the high ground, while the others continued toward the compound on a lower approach vector. The ridgeline was a brutal climb. Loose rocks, steep incline, no cover. Riley moved slowly, testing each handhold, making sure she didn't dislodge rocks that would clatter down and announce her presence. 38 minutes after leaving the wadi, Riley reached the ridgeline. She bellied up to a rock formation that provided natural concealment and good elevation and began building her shooting position. She settled in behind her rifle and looked through the scope at the compound below. The structure looked abandoned at first glance. 6 buildings arranged in a rough square surrounded by a stone wall. 2 vehicles parked in the center courtyard, Toyota Land Cruisers. Riley glassed the area methodically. Left to right, near to far. Movement, southeast corner. A man in civilian clothes carrying an AK-47. Not abandoned, occupied. Riley keyed her radio twice. The signal for enemy present. 3 clicks came back from Hendricks. Acknowledged. Riley continued her scan. Found 2 more guards, both armed, both moving with professional precision. 12 contractors visible. Probably more inside. Through the scope, Riley could see details. Modern rifles, encrypted radios, private military contractors. She ranged the compound. 847 meters. Well within her effective range. Doc's voice crackled in her earpiece. Hawk Ghost, we're in position. 300 meters south. Can you see the main entrance? See? Riley shifted her scope. Affirmative. 2 guards at entrance, both armed. Copy, we're holding position. Keep us updated on patrol patterns. Riley settled in for the long watch. 40 minutes passed. The sun climbed higher. Temperature pushed past 90 degrees. Then Riley saw something that made her blood freeze. A new vehicle approached from the north. Black SUV, armor-plated windows tinted dark. It stopped at the compound entrance. Guards snapped to attention. The entrance gates swung open. A man emerged from the passenger side. Mid-40s, Caucasian, athletic build, wearing khakis and a polo shirt. But the way he moved spoke of military training. Riley zoomed in, studying his face. She photographed him with the scope's integrated camera system. Ghost Hawk, new arrival. Male 40s, appears to be in charge. Copy, can you identify? Negative, running facial recognition now. Colt's voice joined the conversation. 3 minutes passed, then Colt's voice came back tight with tension. Hawk Ghost, facial recognition hit. Subject is Michael Caldwell, former CIA field officer, son of Marcus Caldwell, deceased former CIA deputy director. Riley felt something cold settle in her stomach. What's his connection to Operation Raven? Marcus Caldwell was CIA station chief in Afghanistan 1984 to 1987, oversaw covert operations against Soviet forces. And his son's here, Hendricks said slowly. That's not a coincidence. Doc's voice. Ghost, I'm seeing activity at the north side. Looks like they're loading something into a truck. Riley swung her scope around. 4 contractors were carrying wooden crates from a building to a truck bed. The way they moved suggested the crates were heavy. Colt, can you get overhead imagery? Wait one. Launching Puma. 30 seconds later, Puma's up, sending imagery to your tablets. Riley pulled out her tablet. The thermal image showed multiple heat signatures in the truck bed. Metal objects. Ghost Hawk, those crates could be gold. Thermal signature is consistent with metal. Long pause. Then Hendricks, how much are they loading? 6 crates visible. Each one takes 2 men to carry. The loading operation took 20 minutes. When finished, the truck drove north, disappearing into rocky hills. Ghost trucks heading north. Do we follow? Negative. We need to know what's still. Hendricks stopped mid-sentence. Riley felt it at the same moment. A pressure change. A sense of wrongness. Then the world exploded. The compound detonated in a fireball that rose 300 feet into the morning sky. The shockwave hit Riley 2 seconds later, picking her up and throwing her backward 15 feet. She tumbled down the ridge, slamming into rocks, losing her rifle, the world turning into chaos. She hit something solid and stopped moving. For several seconds, Riley couldn't hear anything except ringing, couldn't see anything except white spots, couldn't think. Then sensation returned. Pain. Her ribs, left side. Breathing felt like stabbing. Cracked ribs, maybe 3. Blood running down her forehead, head wound bleeding like hell. Rifle. Where was her rifle? Riley pushed herself up and looked around. There, 20 feet upslope. The M48-5 lay wedged between rocks. The scope was cracked. The chill was bent, but the rifle looked intact. She crawled to it, retrieved the weapon, checked the action. Still functional. The scope was destroyed, but backup iron sights were intact. She looked at the compound. Gone. Completely obliterated. Buildings collapsed. Fires burning. No movement. Riley keyed her radio with shaking hands. Ghost Hawk. Compound destroyed. What's your status? Static. Ghost Doc Colt anyone. Radio check. More static. Then a burst of noise that might have been a voice. Riley tried to stand. Made it to one knee before dizziness forced her back down. Concussion. Definitely concussion. She pulled out her first aid kit, found quick clot gauze, pressed it against her forehead wound, wrapped a pressure bandage around her head. Next the ribs. She wrapped elastic bandage tight around her torso. Ibuprofen, 800 milligrams. Swallowed dry. Riley checked her gear. Plate carrier intact, Glock still holstered, rifle damaged but functional. Ammunition 147 rounds. Water 1 liter. Radio working but no response. She was alone, injured, in hostile territory. Her grandfather's voice. Pain is temporary. Mission failure is permanent. Riley forced herself to stand and started moving toward where she'd last seen Doc and Hendricks. 300 meters of rocky terrain. Every step sent lightning through her ribs. Every breath tasted like copper. She kept moving, found the rock formation where they'd been hiding, found scattered gear, a helmet lying on its side. Found Colt first. He was 40 feet from the rocks face down. Riley dropped beside him, checked for a pulse. There, weak but present. She rolled him over carefully. Shrapnel wounds, left leg and shoulder, blood soaking his uniform, unconscious but breathing. Riley pulled out her medical kit, tourniquet on the leg, pressure dressing on the shoulder. Quick clot in both wounds, IV line in his right arm. Colt's eyes fluttered open. What happened? Compound exploded. You got hit. Don't move. Doc. Where's Doc? I don't know. Stay here. Riley continued searching. Found Doc 50 meters out, lying behind a boulder. At first she thought he was dead. Then she saw his chest rise. Riley moved to his side. Doc's eyes opened. Morgan. His voice was rough. You look like hell. You should see yourself, Master Chief. Doc tried to sit up, winced, settled back. Burns, back and arms, shrapnel left side. I've been worse. Riley examined him quickly. Serious but not immediately life-threatening. 3rd-degree burns, shrapnel wounds, but no major arterial bleeding. Where's Frost? Doc asked. Riley felt her stomach drop. I haven't found him yet. He was closest to the compound. right at the wall when it blew. Doc closed his eyes. Riley, if he was inside the blast radius, then I'll find what's left and bring him home. You can barely walk. I can walk enough. Doc opened his eyes, studied her. You got a concussion, cracked ribs. You're bleeding through your bandage, and you're going back toward that compound alone. That's the mission. Something changed in Doc's expression. Respect. Dan raised you right. Go. I'll hold here with Colt. Got my rifle. Anyone comes looking, I'll make them regret it. Riley nodded and immediately regretted it as the world spun. Riley, Doc's voice stopped her. Your grandfather made me promise something. When he gave Frost that letter for you, he made me promise that if you ever went on this mission, I'd tell you the truth about how he died. Master Chief, I need to. He knew they were coming. 3 months before Montana. Knew they'd found him. Knew they'd kill him. Doc's voice was steady despite his injuries. He could have run, could have hidden, but he chose Montana deliberately. Isolated area, no civilians. Drew them away from you and your grandmother. The world seemed to stop. He went there to die on his terms, Doc continued. Fought them hand-to-hand at 83 years old. Killed 2 before they got him. Left evidence hidden in places only Frost knew to look. Your grandfather's last mission wasn't trying to stay alive. It was making sure you had everything you needed to finish what he started. Riley felt tears burning. Refused to let them fall. So you go find Frost, Doc said, because Dan Morgan spent his last 3 years preparing you for this exact moment. Don't waste it. Riley took a breath, feeling her broken ribs grind. What about you and Colt? We'll be here. You got 6 hours before Nomad's first extraction window. Find Frost, get the intel, come back. We'll all go home together. And if I don't come back, Doc smiled, teeth red with blood, then I'll tell your grandmother you died finishing what Dan started. She'll be proud, just like I am. Riley nodded once, turned and walked toward the ruins. Every step was agony. Every breath felt like drowning. Her vision kept graying out. She kept walking. The compound was worse up close. Total devastation. Twisted metal. Shattered stone. The smell of burnt plastic and flesh. Riley moved through the rubble, carefully checking every shadow. She found 3 bodies, contractors torn apart. Nothing to identify them. No sign of Hendricks. Riley continued searching, working in a grid pattern. The morning sun climbed higher. Temperature pushed past 100 degrees. She found evidence of the gold scraps of wooden crates, fragments of cargo truck tire tracks leading north. But the bulk was gone, moved before the explosion. Riley reached the northern edge and found something that made her stop. A cave entrance, partially collapsed but still accessible. Hidden behind what had been a storage building. Fresh tire tracks led to it. Fresh boot prints. Riley checked her rifle, chambered around, and entered the cave. The temperature dropped 20 degrees immediately. Riley pulled out her tactical flashlight, attached it to her rifle, and activated it. The beam revealed a tunnel carved from natural rock. The walls were smooth, worn by water. The floor showed recent disturbance, footprints, drag marks, evidence of heavy objects being moved. Riley moved deeper. The tunnel branched. She took the right fork, following the freshest tracks. 50 meters in, she found a small chamber. Evidence of occupation, MRE wrappers, medical supplies, a sleeping bag, empty water bottles. Someone had been living here. Riley saw something else. A metal ammunition box partially hidden under debris. She pulled it out. The box was heavy, locked, but the lock was old, rusted. Riley used her knife to break it open. Inside, wrapped in waterproof plastic, was a field journal. Riley opened it carefully. The first page made her breath catch. Field journal. Daniel R. Morgan, Master Gunnery Sergeant, USMC, 1984 to 2018. Her grandfather's journal. His actual field notes from Operation Raven. Riley flipped through pages with shaking hands. Detailed notes, coordinates, names, dates, maps, photographs. 34 years of investigation. She found an entry from October 2018, 1 month before his death. They know I found the cave system. They know I have proof. Called Frost today. Told him if anything happens to me, give Riley the letter and the map. She's ready. She doesn't know it yet, but she's ready. I've taught her everything I can. The rest she'll learn when she needs to. Montana trip planned for November. Isolated area, good defensive terrain. If they come, I'll take as many as I can. If they don't, I'll have a nice week of hunting. Either way, I'm at peace. This is the last mission. Riley finishes it. She's Morgan blood. She won't quit. Semper Fi. Riley felt something break inside her chest. Not her ribs, something deeper. Her grandfather hadn't died. He'd been murdered. Deliberately, after spending 34 years trying to expose a conspiracy, and he'd spent his last 3 years preparing her to finish what he started. Riley closed the journal, wrapped it in plastic, secured it in her pack. Evidence. Proof. She continued deeper into the cave, following the tunnel as it wound through the mountain. The air grew colder, damper. The walls showed signs of recent excavation, tool marks, explosives damage. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber. Riley's flashlight couldn't reach the far walls. And there in the center, illuminated by her light, she saw Commander Jack Hendricks. He was alive, sitting against a rock, hands bound behind him, with zip ties, blood crusting his face. But his eyes were open, alert, watching her. "Took you long enough," Hendricks said. "Thought maybe you got tired of waiting and went home." Riley felt relief crash over her. "Sir, are you injured?" "Concussion. Probable broken ribs. They caught me right before the blast dragged me down here. Figured I knew too much to kill outright." He smiled. "They didn't count on you surviving." Riley moved to him, cutting the zip ties. "How many?" "4 contractors. They left me here, went to secure something in the deeper caves. They'll be back, probably in the next 10 minutes. Riley helped Hendricks to his feet. He moved stiffly but steadily. "Doc and Colt. Alive, injured but stable, 300 meters southeast of the compound." "Outstanding. Then we need to move. But first," Hendricks gestured deeper into the cave. "You need to see what they've been hiding." They moved together through the darkness until the tunnel opened into a chamber so large Riley's flashlight couldn't find the ceiling. And there, stacked on wooden pallets arranged in neat rows, were gold bars. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Each bar stamped with Cyrillic lettering and Soviet insignia. Riley did the math quickly. $720 million. "Your grandfather found this in May '84, Hendricks said quietly. "Took photographs, documented coordinates. Then he tried to report it. 3 days later, someone tried to kill him in Afghanistan. He realized the conspiracy went high, so he went underground. Spent the next 34 years trying to expose them." Riley swept her light across the gold. "Who did steal it?" "That's the question, isn't it?" A new voice echoed through the chamber. Riley spun, bringing her rifle up. Her flashlight beam found him. Michael Caldwell standing in the tunnel entrance. He held an M4 aimed in their general direction. 4 contractors flanked him, weapons raised, night vision goggles on. "Lower the rifle, Corporal Morgan. You're impressive, but you're not that impressive. 4 trained contractors in night vision versus 1 injured Marine with a flashlight. Do the math." Riley didn't lower her rifle. Through her iron sights, she aimed center mass on Caldwell. "I know what you're thinking," Caldwell continued. "Take the shot, kill me, maybe get 1 or 2 contractors before they light you up." Very heroic, very stupid. Dan Morgan didn't raise stupid grandchildren. "You knew my grandfather." "I knew of him. My father knew him personally. In fact, your grandfather is the reason my father spent the last years of his life looking over his shoulder." Caldwell moved closer. "Marcus Caldwell, CIA Deputy Director, died in 2019 of a heart attack that was definitely natural." The pieces clicked. "Your father stole the gold." "My father secured the gold. There's a difference. When the Soviets evacuated Afghanistan in 1980, they left behind assets. My father made sure those assets didn't fall into the wrong hands. He stole it for himself. He redirected it to fund operations that Congress wouldn't authorize. Black operations that kept America safe. Your grandfather didn't understand that. He thought everything should be official, legal." Caldwell's voice dripped contempt. "Your grandfather was a Boy Scout in a world that rewards pirates." Riley's finger tightened on the trigger. Hendricks' hand touched her arm gently. "Easy, not yet." Caldwell smiled. "This isn't about right and wrong. This is about reality. The gold funds operations. Operations save lives, American lives. That's the only equation that matters." "What operations?" Riley asked. "Eliminations, regime changes, the messy work that keeps Americans safe." Caldwell gestured at the gold. "This cave funded operations over 40 years, including your grandfather. He had evidence. If he'd gone public, it would have destroyed careers, ended operations, gotten people killed. So you killed him instead." "Montana was his choice. He went to ground in the middle of nowhere and forced our hand. He fought well, killed 2 contractors. Your grandfather died a warrior." Riley felt something cold settle in her chest. "What happens now?" "Now you and Commander Hendricks walk out. You forget what you saw. Everyone lives. And if we don't forget," Caldwell's expression didn't change, "then you join your grandfather and 14 others. Riley looked at Hendricks. The old SEAL's face was unreadable, but his eyes said waiting. Not surrendering. Never surrendering. I want to see your face when I pull this trigger, Riley said quietly. Caldwell laughed. You're exactly like your grandfather. He said almost exactly that before we shot him. Time slowed down. Riley felt her heartbeat, felt her breathing, felt the weight of her grandfather's journal in her pack and 34 years of investigation and 14 murdered people. She pulled the trigger. The rifle barked. The muzzle flash lit the cave like lightning. Michael Caldwell's head snapped back. He dropped. The four contractors opened fire. Bullets cracked through the air. Riley was already moving, diving, left, rolling behind rocks. Hendricks went right. Riley came up shooting. Iron sights, close-range point shooting. The contractors had night vision, but they'd been flash-blinded. First contractor, 2 rounds, center mass, down. Second contractor, 1 round face shot, down. Third and fourth, behind, cover firing blind. Hendricks appeared with Caldwell's dropped M4. Full auto burst. Third contractor down, screaming. The fourth contractor ran, silence descended. Riley moved to Caldwell's body, confirmed the kill. Her shot had been precise right between the eyes. Hendricks checked the contractors. 3 dead, 1 wounded but unconscious. He zip-tied the wounded one. We need to move, Hendricks said. That last contractor will bring reinforcements. We've got maybe 20 minutes. What about the gold? Hendricks smiled coldly. Your grandfather planned for this. Documented everything. Drew up plans to destroy the cave system. He pulled out Caldwell's radio, changed frequencies, began transmitting. Nomad, this is Ghost. Emergency extraction. Grid 392847. Multiple casualties. Hostile forces en route. Static. Then Kira's voice. Ghost Nomad, I have your position. ETA 18 minutes. Copy. Be advised, hot LZ. I didn't join the Night Stalkers for boring flights. Nomad out. Hendricks looked at Riley. We've got 18 minutes to get topside, retrieve Doc and Colt, and make the extraction point. Can you run? Riley's ribs felt like knife practice. Her head pounded. Her vision kept graying out. I can run enough, she said. They moved. The Syrian sun had reached its zenith, turning the desert into a blast furnace. Riley and Hendricks emerged from the cave at a dead run. Behind them in the depths, they'd left Caldwell's body and 3 dead contractors and enough gold to fund a small nation's military. And they'd left something else, C4. 6 blocks, set with 40-minute delay timers. When those charges detonated, the cave would collapse. The gold would be buried under thousands of tons of rock. Now they were racing those timers. 38 minutes remaining. They covered the 300 meters to Doc's position in 4 minutes. Found the old SEAL exactly where Riley had left him, rifle across his lap, watching the approach. Colt was conscious, sitting up, his injured arm in a sling, pale but alert. About damn time, Doc said. Heard shooting. Figured you either won or I'd be having a really bad day. We won, Hendricks said, but we need to move. Now. LZ is 2 clicks north. Nomad's inbound. 14 minutes. Doc nodded, started to stand. His face went white. Riley moved to help, but he waved her off. I can walk. Colt tried to stand, made it upright, took 2 steps, and his leg buckled. Riley caught him. Can't put weight on it, Colt said. Shrapnel hit the femur. Riley looked at Hendricks. Colt couldn't walk. Doc could barely walk. Riley was operating on adrenaline and stubbornness. I'll carry him, Riley said. Doc shook his head. Kid, you weigh 120 pounds. He weighs 180. You got broken ribs. I can carry him 2 clicks. My grandfather carried you through Beirut with worse injuries. I can do this. Hendricks studied her face. Whatever he saw made him nod. Doc, can you walk if you use my rifle as a crutch? Yeah, I'm slow but mobile. Outstanding. Riley takes point with Colt. I'll take rear security. Doc in the middle. We move as fast as Riley can manage. Riley turned her back to Colt. Climb on. Piggyback. Lock your arms around my neck, but don't choke me. Colt climbed on. The weight settled across Riley's shoulders like a mountain. Her broken ribs immediately began filing complaints. She started walking. The first 100 meters were the hardest. Her body fought her every step. Her ribs ground together. Her legs shook. But her grandfather's voice echoed, pain is just information. You don't have to obey it. So she acknowledged the pain and kept moving. After 500 meters, something strange happened. The pain didn't go away, but it stopped mattering. Her body found rhythm. Left foot, right foot. Breathe, left foot, right foot. Breathe. Colt spoke quietly near her ear. How are you doing this? Morgan family genetics. We're too stupid to know when to quit. Behind them, Doc laughed. It turned into a cough. That's the truth. Dan Morgan once walked 15 miles with a broken ankle to make it to his own wedding. Riley smiled despite the pain. They covered another 500 meters. One click down, one to go. Then Hendricks' voice contact rear. Two vehicles approaching fast. One click behind us. Riley didn't stop. How long until they're in weapon range? 4 minutes, maybe 5. How long until we reach the LZ? 8 minutes at current pace. The math was ugly. The vehicles would catch them before extraction. Options, Riley asked. We split up. I stay behind to slow them down. No. Doc's voice was firm. Nobody stays behind. We all go home, or none of us do. Riley's mind raced. How many hostiles? Thermal shows 8 contacts. 2 vehicles, 4 per vehicle. Heavy weapons. Riley stopped walking. Colt slid off her back. She turned to Hendricks. Give me 30 seconds to set up. I can engage at extreme range. Slow them down. Hendricks shook his head. Your scope's destroyed. Iron sights at 1,000+ yards against moving vehicles. My grandfather made a 900-yard shot with iron sights in a blizzard. I can make this in clear weather. Doc met her eyes. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then, yeah, I believe you can. Riley turned to Hendricks. Commander, I can do this, but I need 1 minute, and I need you 3 to keep moving. When Nomad arrives, you get on that bird. If I'm not there, you leave without me. Corporal, that's the only way we all survive. Hendricks studied her face, then nodded slowly. You get 1 minute, not 30 seconds. 1 full minute. Then you abandon position and run. We'll lay down covering fire if they get close. Understood. Riley moved to a rocky outcrop that provided elevation. She dropped her pack, pulled out her grandfather's field journal, and tucked it inside her shirt next to her heart. Then she built her position. Bipod deployed, rifle settled, body prone, iron sights aligned. The vehicles were visible now. 2 Toyota Hilux trucks with machine guns mounted in the beds. Moving fast, closing distance. Riley ranged them by eye. 1,200 meters, maybe 1,300. At that distance, with iron sights, she'd be shooting on instinct. She watched the vehicles, moving fast but not evasively. Confident, they were about to learn differently. Riley controlled her breathing. 4 seconds in, 7 seconds hold, 8 seconds out. Her heart rate dropped. The world narrowed. The lead vehicle had a PKM machine gun in the bed. The gunner was standing exposed. Stupid. Riley calculated lead distance. The vehicle was moving 60 kilometers per hour. That was 16.7 meters per second. Time of flight at 1,300 meters was 1.8 seconds. She needed to lead by 30 meters. She aimed at a point in space where the vehicle would be in 2 seconds. Aimed at nothing. Aimed at the future. And squeezed. The rifle barked. Riley worked the bolt, not waiting to see impact. Aimed, squeezed, bolt, aim, squeeze, bolt, aim, squeeze. 4 shots in 12 seconds. Through the iron sights, Riley watched the lead vehicle swerve. The gunner was gone. The vehicle veered off the road, stopped. The second vehicle slowed, taking evasive action. Riley aimed at it, let it, squeezed. The shot hit near the engine block. Steam erupted. The vehicle slowed but didn't stop. 2 more shots. One hit the windshield. The vehicle swerved, stopped. Both trucks stationary, occupants dismounting, taking cover. Riley had bought time. Maybe 3 minutes. Enough. She grabbed her rifle and ran. Her ribs screamed. Her lungs burned. She ran anyway. The LZ was visible ahead, a flat area marked with an IR strobe. And there, growing larger in the western sky, was the most beautiful sight Riley had ever seen. An MH-60 Blackhawk flying low and fast. Hendricks, Doc, and Colt had already reached the LZ. Doc was on one knee providing security. Colt sat with his back against a rock. Hendricks stood, waving the helicopter in. Riley covered the last 200 meters in a sprint. She reached the LZ just as the Blackhawk flared rotors screaming. The helicopter touched down. Side doors opened. The crew chief gestured frantically. Doc moved first, helping Colt up and half dragging him to the aircraft. Hendricks provided cover. Riley climbed aboard. Doc and Colt strapped in. Hendricks jumped in last. The Blackhawk lifted immediately, accelerating hard. Through the open door, Riley could see the disabled vehicles, could see figures moving, could see muzzle flashes. Then they were out of range, screaming across the Syrian desert at 140 knots. Riley leaned back against the bulkhead, finally allowing herself to relax. The adrenaline was draining away, leaving pain and exhaustion. Doc reached over to squeeze her shoulder. Outstanding shooting back there. Your grandfather would be proud. Riley didn't trust herself to speak. She just nodded. The combat medic finished with Colt and moved to Riley. Let me see those ribs. I'm fine. That wasn't a request. Riley let the medic unwrap her bandage. His hands were professional, gentle. He pressed carefully along her ribs. 3 fractures, maybe 4. No displacement. Lung sounds clear. You're lucky. He rewrapped over ribs, gave her water and pills, antibiotics and something for pain. Riley took them. Hendricks moved through the cabin, checking on each of them. He settled next to Riley. You made 4 hits at 1,300 meters with iron sights on moving targets. That's the best shooting I've seen in 40 years. My grandfather trained me. I know. Hendricks pulled out her grandfather's journal from inside his own shirt. He must have taken it from her pack. 34 years of investigation, names, dates, evidence, proof of everything. Riley took the journal. What happens now? Now we get this to people who can act on it. FBI, DOD Inspector General, congressional oversight. The conspiracy dies in the light. Riley looked out the door at the Syrian desert passing below. Somewhere back there in approximately 15 minutes, 6 blocks of C4 were going to collapse a cave system. $720 million would be buried forever. Her grandfather's final mission would be complete. There's one more thing, Hendricks said. He pulled an envelope from his pocket, with Riley's name in familiar handwriting. Dan gave this to me 3 years before he died. Said to give it to you after the mission was complete. Riley took the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a single letter dated October 2018. Little Hawk, it began. If you're reading this, you've finished the mission. You found the gold, found the truth, made them pay. I knew you would. You're probably angry. Angry that I went to Montana. Angry that I didn't run. Let me explain. I was 83 when I wrote this. My body was failing. I had maybe 2 years left. I could have spent them running, hiding. Or I could have spent them preparing you. I chose you. Montana wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. I drew them away from you, from your grandmother. I chose terrain I could defend. I fought them. Killed 2. Died on my terms. But more importantly, I spent my last 3 years teaching you everything. Every shot, every skill, every story. I packed a lifetime of knowledge into 3 years because I knew time was short. I was preparing you for war, not with uniforms and flags, the kind with shadows and lies. I was preparing you to finish what I started. I died fighting. That's what Marines do. But I didn't die defeated. I died knowing you would finish it. Be proud of what you've done. Be proud that you're a Morgan, and Morgan women don't quit. I love you forever. Tell your grandmother I'm sorry I couldn't grow old with her, but I kept my promise to protect our family. Semper Fi, Little Hawk. Your grandfather, Gunny Dan. Riley read the letter 3 times, then folded it carefully and tucked it inside her shirt next to her heart. She didn't cry, but her eyes burned and her throat closed, and something in her chest felt like it was simultaneously breaking and healing. The helicopter crossed into Turkey. Kira's voice, feet dry, friendly territory, ETA to Incirlik, 22 minutes. Riley checked her watch. The C4 would detonate in 6 minutes. She watched the desert behind them. 6 minutes later, she saw it. A dust cloud rising visible for 3 seconds before disappearing. The cave collapsing. $720 million buried forever. Operation Raven was over. 3 weeks later, Riley stood at Arlington National Cemetery wearing dress blues and holding a folded flag, while a Marine Honor Guard fired a 21-gun salute. Master Gunnery Sergeant Daniel Robert Morgan's funeral was happening 40 years late, but properly. With honors. With truth. The Commandant of the Marine Corps read the citation accompanying her grandfather's Navy Cross. His service in Korea, his covert operations, his investigation into Operation Raven, his deliberate sacrifice to protect his family. When the rifles fell silent and the bugler played taps, the Commandant presented the flag to Riley's grandmother. On behalf of the President, the Commandant, and a grateful nation, please accept this flag as a symbol of our appreciation for your husband's honorable and faithful service. Riley's grandmother took the flag, held it against her chest, looked at Riley. He knew, the old woman said quietly. He knew you'd finish it. That's why he could go to Montana in peace. After the ceremony, Commander Hendricks approached, walking with a cane now. Corporal Morgan, how are you holding up? I'm okay, sir. Liar, but I respect the attempt. He looked at her grandfather's headstone. Dan deserved this. Yes, sir. The investigation's moving forward. FBI's got 18 people in custody, 3 senators under investigation. Your grandfather's journal is the cornerstone. Without it, they'd have nothing. Riley looked at him. Michael Caldwell. Dead in Syria, along with 4 contractors. Official story terrorist attack. Real story stays classified. And the gold. Buried under 10,000 tons of rock. Syrian government knows it's there. Recovery would cost more than it's worth, so it stays buried forever. Riley felt closure settle in her chest. What happens to me? She asked. Hendricks pulled out an envelope. Orders. You're being promoted to sergeant. New assignment, Marine Corps Scout Sniper School, Quantico. Chief instructor. Riley stared. Sir, I'm 28. I'm not qualified. The commandant disagrees. He thinks your grandfather trained you better than any course could. He thinks you've got something to pass on. Hendricks handed her the orders. You report in 3 weeks. You'll teach the next generation. Continue his legacy. Riley took the orders. I don't know if I can. Yes, you do. You carried a 180-pound man 2 kilometers with broken ribs. You made 4 hits at 1,300 meters with iron sights. You finished a mission your grandfather fought for 40 years. You can teach. After Hendricks left, Riley stood alone at her grandfather's grave. She thought about the cave in Syria, about the journal that exposed a conspiracy, about a mission that started before she was born and ended with her finger on a trigger. I finished it, Gunny, she said quietly, just like you asked. They're going to prison or they're dead. The gold's gone. The truth's out. Mission complete. The wind picked up, rustling through trees. I'm going to teach now. Pass on what you taught me. Make sure the next generation knows what it means to finish the mission. She touched the headstone. I love you. Thank you for everything. Thank you for 3 years. Thank you for Montana. Thank you for making sure I was ready. She paused. I hope I made you proud. The wind answered, and Riley could almost hear, you did, Little Hawk. You did. 6 months later, Riley stood on the firing line at Quantico watching 15 students prepare for qualification. 12 males, 3 females. All thinking they were hot shit. They were about to learn. The range was set for 1,000 yards. Standard qualification, 5 shots. After scores were tallied, Riley stepped to the firing line. I'm Sergeant Riley Morgan. I'll be your chief instructor. Some of you are thinking I'm too young, too small, too female to teach you anything. You're wrong, but I'm going to prove it. She settled behind a rifle, her grandfather's M1 Garand, the same one from Korea. Target is 1,000 yards. I'm using iron sights, no scope, no magnification, just eyes experience in everything my grandfather taught me. She chambered around. My grandfather made a 900-yard shot in Korea with this rifle. Iron sights. Blizzard. Saved 40 Marines. I'm about to make a 1,000-yard shot in perfect weather. Watch and learn. Riley settled into position. The familiar ritual, the breathing, the way her body knew exactly how to hold the weapon. She squeezed. The Garand barked. 1,000 yards downrange steel rang. Riley worked the bolt, fired again. Ring, another, ring, another, ring. 5 shots in 18 seconds. 5 hits with iron sights. She stood cleared, the rifle turned to face her students. Their mouths hung open. That's the standard, not because I say so, but because that's what it takes to be a Marine Scout sniper. Excellence isn't optional. Questions? One student raised his hand. Sergeant Morgan, how long did it take you to learn to shoot like that? Riley thought about her grandfather, about 18 years of learning, about a mission in Syria that required every skill he'd taught her. 18 years in one mission. Next question. What mission? Riley smiled. That's classified. But I'll tell you this, everything I'm going to teach you I learned from my grandfather. Master Gunnery Sergeant Daniel Morgan, Korean War veteran. Best shot I ever knew. Best Marine I ever knew. He spent his life passing down knowledge. Now I'm doing the same. She gestured at the range. By the time you leave, you'll make shots you think are impossible now. You'll function when you're exhausted, injured, scared. You'll complete the mission even when everything goes wrong. Riley looked at each student. But more importantly, you'll understand that being a sniper isn't about shooting. It's about patience, discipline, finishing what you start, never quitting even when quitting would be easier. She picked up her grandfather's rifle. This weapon is 72 years old. Been to Korea, Syria, and 100 places between. It still shoots true because someone took care of it. Someone respected it. Riley's voice dropped. That's what I'm teaching you. Not just how to shoot, but how to be someone worth teaching. Someone who respects the legacy. Someone who'll pass it forward. She paused, looking at the three female students. Some of you will face people who doubt you. Prove them wrong, not with words. With performance. With excellence. That's what my grandfather taught me. That's what I'm teaching you. The class began, 12 weeks of intensive training, teaching them ballistics and patience, and that the mind quits before the body. 3 females started, 2 graduated. Both went on to successful careers. Both cited Sergeant Riley Morgan as why they didn't quit. 12 males started, 8 graduated. All learned that excellence had no gender. Doc Sullivan showed up periodically. The old SEAL would appear to observe, then pull Riley aside for coffee. "You're doing good work," he told her. "Dan would be proud." "I hope so. I know so. Most teach techniques. A few teach skills. Only the best teach legacy. You are teaching legacy." 10 years after Syria, Riley was promoted to gunnery sergeant, still teaching at Quantico, still carrying her grandfather's M1 Garand, still making 1,000-yard shots with iron sights. Doc Sullivan passed that year. 83 years old. Died peacefully. The funeral was at Arlington. Full honors. Riley told the story of Beirut, told how her grandfather saved Doc's life, and how Doc spent 40 years honoring that debt. After the ceremony, Riley stood at her grandfather's grave. "Doc's gone now," she told the headstone. "He lived a good life. Said to tell you he kept his promise. Looked after your granddaughter." She smiled. "I'm still teaching, still passing on what you taught me. Got my 10th class graduating next month. They don't know it, but they're learning from you. Every technique, every story, every lesson, it's all you." The November wind rustled through trees. "I miss you," she said quietly. "Still miss you every day, but I understand why you did what you did, why you chose Montana, why you spent your last years training me. You weren't preparing me to survive. You were preparing me to finish what you started." And I did. Mission complete, Gunny. She touched the headstone one last time, then walked away. Behind her, carved in stone, Master Gunnery Sergeant Daniel R. Morgan, United States Marine Corps Navy, Cross Korea, Cold War Operations, Operation Raven, 1935-2018. Patience beats speed every time. Semper Fidelis.